Final Fantasy X is obviously the 10th numeral installment in the series. It is personally my second favorite in the series, the first being 7, and has been on the receiving end of very harsh criticism. Most of this is due to the protagonist, Tidus. But once you get past the bad physical appearance and the horrendous voice acting, you realize he is one of the most memorable protagonists in the series. Other harsh comments revolve around the romantic subplot and the so-called immaturity of the game. Most of these comments come from Final Fantasy VI fans who think that the scene where Locke and Edgar ignore the enemies in front of them to swoon over Terra because she knows magic is more mature than an upbeat protagonist. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, 10 has my favorite soundtrack, ending, and one of the most beautiful worlds in gaming. The story also features the most realistic romantic subplot in the series, unlike 8's forced romance between an emo jerk and a girl who is just as cheerful as she is shallow. So, the story starts off in the metropolis of Zanarkand. Tidus is a professional blitzball player, blitzball being the futuristic equivalent of soccer or American football. The game is cut short when a creature known only as Sin destroys Zanarkand. Eventually, with the help of his emotionally distant father's friend, Auron, Tidus is thrust 1,000 years into the future. From here, the story slows down a bit to introduce the characters and setting, but the story does pick up later. Instead of spacing the story out, 10 lays all of the main characters and the basic storyline on the table very early on in the game. Don't worry, the story still keeps the player interested and is actually better placed than you may have heard. Many fans of the series say that the death of Aerith is the saddest moment in gaming history. I will be one of the few to disagree and give the ending of Final Fantasy X this title. I didn't really have an emotional reaction to Aerith's death, but the ending to this gave me a lump in my throat. Even though the ending is sad, I love it because it's unexpected and emotional. Then 10 too had to ruin it. But we'll pretend that game never existed. Like I have said before, Tidus is not the most well-received character. This is mainly due to his terrible voice actor, James Arnold Taylor. This comes as a surprise since Taylor gave a good performance in the Matrix short film Detective Story. Anyway, Tidus is also the victim of a cliché anime appearance, although he is far from the cliché many will perceive him to be. Even though he's not my favorite character, he is one of the best lead characters in the series. Tidus is a far cry from previous Final Fantasy lead characters in the sense that he is believable. Unlike moody Cloud and Squall, Tidus has a positive outlook on life, a thin-skinned personality, and a jealous nature. His personality even develops throughout the game. At first, he thinks that self-sacrifice is wrong and unnecessary. After falling in love with Yuna, his outlook changes. Yuna is the leading lady, a young woman who is willing to sacrifice her own happiness for the good of others. As with Tidus, her personality changes throughout the story, and she becomes more cheerful. The romance plot is very realistic since they do not only fall in love, but Tidus' happy nature rubs off on shy, bottled-up Yuna, and her serious nature rubs off on Tidus. This is much better than 8's romantic subplot, which just feels like two people are attracted to each other. They want to call it love for some reason. I know that Final Fantasy VIII fans are probably angry right now, but if it's any consolation, Laguna is my favorite character in the series, and 8 was the first Final Fantasy I played, and the reason I'm giving this review now. Other than Tidus and Yuna, there are memorable characters, and overall the entire cast is terrific. Well, Kimahri was nothing more than a space failure and a very pointless character. The villain is terrific, and I'm glad he was included in Dizdea, or however you pronounce it. The villain is terrific because he really isn't a bad guy. In gaming, the bad guy is usually bad and evil, but you manage to feel for this villain. I won't say too much about him to spoil the plot, but let's just say I like him. Now, it just wouldn't be a Final Fantasy game without a character named Cid, now would it? Cid makes his appearance in Final Fantasy X as the father of one of the player characters, Riku, and the leader of the Al Bhed tribe. He also provides the party with an airship later on in the game, which is basically the role that he's most associated with within the Final Fantasy series. Cid is really, well, I don't really have much to say about Cid since he's really not the best Cid in the series. Personally, my favorite Cids are Cid Highwind from Final Fantasy VII, and my absolute all-time favorite Cid is the bearded mechanic from Final Fantasy IV. Other than this, there really isn't much to say about this Cid. Like I said, he's not the best Cid. He's certainly not the worst Cid, but he's one of the worst. He's one of the bad Cids, really. He's really easily forgettable, and, well, let's just say I actually like the Cid from Final Fantasy VIII better than I liked this Cid, or more than I like this Cid. This Cid was kind of, well, I just didn't like him. I mean, yeah. That's pretty much all I have to say about Cid. While previous entries took place in the stereotypical settings of medieval fantasy and Japanese-inspired sci-fi worlds, 10 provides the first actual fantasy world. When I say fantasy, I mean a unique feel and a world that is hard to compare to other settings. Spira is based off beautiful Asian islands such as Thailand and Indonesia. The soundtrack, other than one heavy metal tune, fits the world perfectly and has some of the most relaxing songs in the series. Gameplay is pretty simple. The active time battle introduced in 4 was taken out and replaced with a more strategic system. The game also forces you to switch between characters. If you play as the same 3 characters, they are the only ones who will level up. 10 also introduces the sphere grid. I don't want to spend too much time on this, so I'll just say it ain't as bad as 12's license system. Exploration is somewhat limited in this installment, but the good news is that you will never get lost and there are still plenty of side quests. By now, old-school Final Fantasy veterans think I'm just some kid who came into the series late. Well, let me just defend myself and say that I have played every Final Fantasy game, and, well, my opinion doesn't change that much. Overall, 10 is a terrific gaming experience. Its gameplay is quite linear compared to other Final Fantasies, but it's still very satisfying. Next to Final Fantasy VII, it is my favorite game in the series. And I'm sorry that I keep on stuttering throughout this review. My next review will be better. Don't worry, this is my first review. Next up, I may be doing the Matrix Trilogy review. I'm not sure, because that one might take a lot of stuff. But, hey, stick around.